So let's bring him in, the head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks, who we're very pleased to have on the show. Manny, thanks so much for doing this. How you doing?
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. Doing well, thank you.
Yeah, super excited to have you here. We've got a few questions. Right now, this market is a bit drunk on Elias Pettersson here. What can you tell us about your experience so far with the young defenseman who's made a really good impression through his first few NHL games?
Well, I think the thing that stands out for me most, the way he started the season, you don't know what to expect from a 20-year-old beginning his pro career. But from day one, he was very poised with the puck. He knew exactly who he was as a player. He didn't come in trying to be something that he wasn't. And he stuck to that game plan. Jordan Smith, the D coach here, has done a really good job working with him, kind of going through video and cleaning up some of the aspects of his game. But for the most part, he sticks to what he does best. He's physical, he kills plays, and he advances pucks on breakouts. So he's the way he has started and kind of continued that process throughout the season so far has been a very pleasant surprise for us.
Distinct his identity is, and him really knowing his game, knowing his role. Can that sometimes be difficult for young players as they're climbing the ranks because maybe in lower leagues or levels they're able to kind of dominate in their first pair, first power play, and now as they climb the ranks and it becomes more difficult, they can sort of struggle to find what's my role, what's my identity. Is that an uncommon trait for a player like DPD to pick that up so quickly?
It is somewhat uncommon. You find that mistake being made by a lot of young guys or young pros trying to find their way to becoming an everyday NHLer or an everyday pro is understanding what makes you good, understanding what make has gotten you to that level, and then executing that to the best of your ability. And that's PD in a nutshell. He didn't come in trying to run a power play. He didn't come in trying to skate pucks all the way up the ice. He knows exactly what he needs to do, and he has followed that formula to a T. And obviously, it's paid off for him to get a couple NHL games under his belt and continue to play with that confidence is a credit to him understanding what it takes for him to be a pro at the next level.
Manny, this Abbotsford team as a whole, a bit of a rut recently, but even more recently, really kind of turned it around. I was there a couple weeks ago, and I asked you just about your team's response. I think it was the San Jose Barracuda you guys were playing, and there was a bad bounce off the stanchion, 4-3 early in the third. I'm sure you remember the game. You talked about your team's response to that and how you're not sure if they would respond the same way a month ago. What kind of growth have you seen from your team as a whole this year?
I think that the biggest growth for us is a belief in ourselves. Number one, trusting the structure and trusting the system that we're trying to play. Once they bought into that, and then playing it to the best of their ability. It's one thing to know the system, but within that, it's the individual efforts of guys, how hard they are on pucks, how willing they are to forecheck pucks back defensively for our D-men to kill plays and get on top of pucks with numbers. Once you have that level of buy-in, but also the guys' willingness to compete and push one another, that's what has kind of been the biggest growing point for me. And it's a credit to them understanding what it takes to be successful and what it takes to win on a nightly basis. You look at some of the teams in the league and they don't surprise you with anything. You know exactly what their game plan is going to be. You know exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to try to score, but they basically execute it and say, try to stop us. So we're trying to get to that level where we play one way and execute it to the best of our ability. And in doing so, the last few weeks, it's obviously paid off for us.
Jonathan Lekkerimaki appears to have had a pretty smooth, seamless transition to the AHL, 14 goals in 24 games. What stands out about his game to you? What's it been like working with him? And what do you think the next step for him developmentally looks like?
Well, obviously, the couple of things in his game that make him a special player is number one, his ability to get out of tight spots. He has incredible set of hands, and he's in a lot of situations offensively where he has numbers closing on him. He has back pressure. He has D with tight gaps, but he finds a way to advance a play and make something out of nothing, which is a pretty special talent to have. And he's able to do those things at high pace. So that's number one. And then obviously you talked about his goal scoring ability. He does have an elite shot. He gets it off quite quickly, but the most impressive thing for me in the way he's scoring is he's getting to tough places. He gets inside, he gets to the slot, he gets around the net. And if you look at his heat map or you look at his goals, the majority of them are within 10, 15 feet of the net, and probably less than that. So his willingness to get inside is what is making him so successful at this level. And the progression for him, or the evolution of his game, is just continue that, to play with that fearlessness of being able to get inside, and continue to execute with the puck. You saw when he did get a couple of games in the NHL, he was able to do the same thing. He advanced plays. He got pucks out of tough spots to his line mates and to D-men. So he's an intelligent player that is just learning what it's like and how heavy guys are at the next level.
A guy who earned a spot on the NHL team at the start of the year, obviously he's now back down in the A, and he's playing really well, is Aatu Räty. With a guy like that, what do you do as a coach when a player, and again, I don't know how he reacted to it, you know better than I do, but when a player is probably on cloud nine because he made the NHL team and then he gets sent down, like, how do you as a coach kind of massage that relationship?
Well, it's not really a lot of massaging that needs to take place. It's the attitude of the player coming down that dictates what those next few weeks or what that next step in their evolution is going to be. And I think that's a credit to the people and the players that we have in this organization. The guys that have come down have all had the right attitude about them. They're obviously disappointed. They all want to be in the NHL, but they realize that the opportunity in the American League to play more minutes, get their game in order, continue to get their touches on the puck, it's a part of their developmental process. It's not they come down with a woe is me attitude and this sucks and I hate this. It's, they've come back with a positive mindset. And, if you look at Atu's game, he has excelled in the last few weeks because of that mindset. He comes here, he works his tail off in practice. That translates right into the game. And we don't always, we're not preaching him getting points and you need to produce offense for us. It's more a product of him doing all the right things that he's now in position to get these points and get these goals. He's doing what's expected of him and what's asked of him within our system.
Organizationally, it seems like there have been, many situations, Räty being one of them, where some of your top prospects will come up, get 5 to 15 games, however many it is, get a taste of the NHL, and then go back to the American League to work on their craft. What do you see as the advantages of this type of player development strategy?
Well, it is a process to become an everyday NHLer. There's so many learned behaviors and lessons that take place throughout the course of the year. And for guys to get those sample sizes, there's obviously a number of things that play into that, but for guys to get that sample size, a lot of times they're learning that every week, every month, every quarter of the season, you want to call it, the play gets that much better and that much more intense and that much harder. So obviously when guys get called up, they're full of adrenaline, they're playing on a high, they're at the NHL level, but you soon realize that it is an absolute grind to have to play your absolute best every other night of the week. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing with the guys getting a sample size. Perhaps that adrenaline wears off a little bit and they're not getting the minutes they would like, or we as an organization would like to see them have, which means they're not getting their touches, which means they're not continuing to develop. So as much as you talk about the American League being a developmental league, the NHL is not a developmental league. You have to, your game needs to be NHL ready when you get there, and it has to stay NHL ready and to be an everyday NHL player. So it's kind of for them, it's a lesson in the fact that it is a process, and to stay there on a daily basis, there can't be too many ups and downs in your game. It's the consistency at which you play your game that's going to keep you there.
Manny, another player I want to ask you about, Kirill Kudryavtsev, another young defenseman. I see the point totals, but when I watch him play, like, I've noticed a pretty solid two-way game as well. What have you made of his rookie season?
I think he goes in that same boat in terms of you don't know what you're going to get out of a 20-year-old coming into this league. But for him, you touched on it. He's getting points, and if someone were just to look at the stat line, you would be kind of amazed that a 20-year-old defenseman's coming up with these kind of numbers. But for him, it's a product of him doing the right things. He's not a very large defenseman by any means, but he does a great job with his stick, killing plays. He's aggressive on pucks. Defensively, he gets into people and he has great gaps. So that allows him to not have to defend very much. And then getting those assists, he knows when to advance the puck, when to get it to the net, when to deliver, when it's just time to be safe and either punt a puck or just put it back to the bottom. So his intelligence is what has allowed him to get those point totals.
I'm curious for yourself as a head coach now, based off your playing experience, how did that shape the way you try and coach, and who are maybe some of your most significant coaching influences?
I think kind of who I am as a coach is kind of a collection of all the things I'd seen over the years as a player. I know as a player, you distinctly remember things that you like a coach does, things that you don't like, the way a message is delivered, certain drills that are run in practice, the way things are taught. So for me, it's a constant kind of record keeping of the things that clicked with me and that worked with me, and then on the flip side, things that I absolutely hated as a player. I don't want those to show up in the way I coach. And as far as influences in that, I had the opportunity to play for Ken Hitchcock in Columbus. Obviously a very intelligent coach, understood the game really, really well. And the way he taught it wasn't ideal for me, but we had a great rapport, and eventually I understood how to take the message, not the tone. And he was a good teacher of the game. And then going from there to Todd McClellan, who I found was an incredible communicator. There was no gray areas with him. You knew exactly where you stood. You knew exactly what was expected of you. And it was not only the tone, but the way he said things. And he never mixed words, never, like I said, you always knew where you stood with him. So for me, I try to be as communicative as possible with my players. I try to make sure that there's no gray areas. They understand what's expected within the system, what's acceptable, what is not, and then more so what my expectations are of them as a player within the system. So I think those things for today's athlete are really important, that they understand the why and they want to know all the information.
That's really interesting. That's a great answer. Thank you for going so in depth on that. We'll give you some rapid fire ones to close it out here. I've got one for you. The chat is asking a lot about your face-off ability. How did you get so good at face-offs during your playing career?
Again, it's a over the course of a playing career, you just kind of develop things that work, things that don't work. So it's going against different guys. And for me, really, it was understanding what I was good at and then just honing in on those things and not trying to have 6 or 7 different moves that I would try in the face-off circle. But I had 1 or 2 of my go-tos that I knew would work. And then the other part of it was thinking back to the early in my career to how I finished. as you get older, you understand how strong guys are on their stick and how physical it is in the circle. So once you get a book on guys and you understand how hard you need to go, then it just becomes repetition, repetition, repetition.
Manny, I apologize. You might have already answered this, but why Abbotsford? What made Abbotsford the right fit for you?
A number of things. Number one, it's the quality of people here. Obviously, I know the organization. Wanting to be a part of it over the last couple of years, the transformation that it's gone through, and for me, looking at it from the outside, I wanted an understanding of what Talk was doing to turn it around in Vancouver. That was intriguing, and then in my discussions with RJ in the summertime, just understanding how important or how much of an emphasis they put on the development of the guys in Abbotsford and how closely that relationship is to guys getting called, whatever it is, 70 kilometers down the road, and the necessity to get some players up and running was intriguing for me. The fact that there is an emphasis on guys developing, and I don't want to say the stress of it, but the importance that they put on it, I enjoy that stress. I want it to mean something. I want there to be value there. I didn't want to be in a situation where it was, here's your guys, do whatever you want, and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. There's a definite plan here in place. So the way RJ laid it out, it was definitely something that I wanted to be a part of.
Manny, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it. We'll get you back on the show for sure. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
There he is, Manny Malhotra, the head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks. The chat was loving that. Those were great answers. Those were phenomenal answers. The what I really want to focus on is the coaching influences. That was such a thoughtful, that might be the best answer any guest has ever given on this show, I think.
Yeah, you can tell he was really mindful of his experiences as a player and thinking of how to, for example, mentioning Hitchcock and McClellan, taking pieces and tidbits from every coach that he had, appreciating what worked there, what maybe he could improve on once he became a head coach. It's clear that he's put a lot of thought and intention behind his coaching style. It isn't just a case of player retires and goes, I understand the game really well, I am going to excel as a coach. He's clearly put a lot of thought and prep into thinking about exactly, like we talk about players finding their identity, he's put so much thought into his own identity as a head coach too.
That was awesome. That was great. Our thanks again to Manny Malhotra.